Hello and welcome in my studio. And probably you say, hey Michael, where is your canvas? Well, there is no canvas yet, because I decided today it will be a surprise show. My steady students know that my wife Els and I made a spectacular trip to Alaska. I wanted to see those gold fields with my own eyes. And did I find any gold? Not really, it was only cold, not gold. Anyway, I'm still not gonna tell you what I'm gonna do. Like I said, it will be a surprise and we will see you in a moment. Okay, let me tell you the plan of today's episode. We're gonna paint a cold painting full of ice and the main character will be an orca. So now you know. We're gonna start with a faraway glow behind the icy mountains with yellow ochre, Elysian crimson and titanium white. The second layer will be phthalo blue, a bit light yellow and lots of titanium white, and this will work excellent for the reflection of the earth in the moist of the atmosphere, especially in the early evening. And if you have painted with me before, you know this is my standard basic layer for the sky. And from there it can go everywhere. It can become a storm sky, a sunset sky, and this time it will be a cold blue sky. So no worries, we will keep it simple. Most important part is that we make nice gradients between the layers, and you do that with a very soft aftertouch. Just as the sketch, I kept it simple, almost nothing. I made a very small, thin sketch with hardly any details, because this painting will be for 90% freehand. So we move our way up and we go over the mountains, and as this is a new canvas, we really have to push the paint into the gesso layer. And with a big painting like this, I just walk around and paint from the other side with the camera. At the top we can add a bit more ultramarine to the mix to create more depth in the painting. With a very soft touch and the brush loaded with highlight, we can paint light wind feathers in the cold blue sky. Nothing special, just give it a try and keep it very light. Let me show you the technique. We load the 1-inch brush full of highlight paint and then we push it upwards. And we have to do that into the wet paint. It should be wet, because otherwise it doesn't work. It won't work on a dry surface. So when you do a brush stroke, the paint has to melt into the wet underlayer. Really, you can't go wrong with this technique, it's so easy. These cloud feathers are often seen above icy mountains, and actually they are fun to do. So practice a bit and you'll have a great result. In the left corner below we can paint a few purple faraway mountains. If we mix ultramarine blue, Elysian crimson, a little bit of white and maybe a touch of the light ochre mix to blush the purple down, now we can make a few nice, like I said, faraway misty mountains. And this mountain area is just a small part in the painting, but it gives the viewer the feeling of depth and distance. In front of this range we can add a bit of mist, and then the sea. Well, the sea had this greenish purplish glow, a bit bluish, and for the first time in my life I saw real floating floes or icebergs, and then the giant mountain. This mountain range comes out of the sea like a huge ice and rock wall, an impressive piece of nature. For us painters, ideal to work on. Everything is possible and we don't need to be so picky about small details. With a dark grey and a bit of burnt sienna, we can push our way forwards over the blank canvas. So watch my technique. I hold the brush like a spoon, pushing the paint into the canvas. And on the light side or left side, we can add a bit of lighter grey. Down below we can make a ground layer for the eyes, and then we can start scratching with the knife. And that is the fun part. We take a little roll of light phthalo blue mix and let the knife scratch over the wet surface. I admit, in the beginning it drives my students crazy when I start talking about knife techniques. And that is so funny, at least for me that is. But finally, when I show them all the techniques from close by, it will work fine. And that is for me always a feeling of victory when a student is finally able to do it. And if you ever need help with techniques or mixing or other things, you're always welcome to hop in for a chat. Down below the rock we're gonna paint a bluish lighter gray, what will be a great foundation for the snow. And then the knife comes in, and with some light strokes we can create a rough snowy surface. But before we go on, we want more dark rocks, and with the same technique, holding the brush sidewards, we push the paint into the gesso cotton. Because that's what we actually do. We have a piece of cotton, give it some gesso layers, and we call it a canvas, and then we start putting paint on it. Actually, you must be a bit disturbed to do that. Yes, we might say that we painters are pretty disturbed, but what the heck, as long as we're having fun, right? And above all, it seems to be very good for your mind to be busy with art and music, very rest-giving, and it brings you in mental balance. How is that? Good to know. In the meantime, we are still building up the rock, and you know what? Let me speed up the film a bit, otherwise you will fall asleep seeing me doing the same move all over your screen. But before we move on, let's scratch some snow over the dark rocks before the paint is drying. The weather is at the moment extremely hot, and in my television studio is no air conditioning, so the paint is drying quick. And yes, it's oil paint, I know, but the air is pretty dry. And I told you before, the knife works great, but only when the first layer is soaking wet. So remember to use a good medium, what doesn't dry too fast. Some of my students use walnut oil, a very pleasant medium, and you don't smell it. In the meantime, I'm scratching the snow into the surface with a very light pressure, almost nothing. We use 3 tones of the phthalo blue color we used for the sky as the snow color. Dark, middle and a light tone, and it works great. When there's light, there is shadow, and we can add a bit of ultramarine blue and a bit of dark bluish gray to approach that. So we get a good contrast between the light and dark sides of the rocks. Remember, the light comes from the left. On the top of it we can add a bit of highlight as the sun is shining pretty bright on the mountains. In this part we can make a big slope of snow with light shadow and muddy parts. Just let the brush go and you'll see he will do the work for you. And there's no pressure, and sometimes I have 2 colors on my brush, which gives a great effect. A little bit of light, a little bit of dark, and there you go. On the average, we can give the snow a bluish effect, and that will cause a cool atmosphere. Then we're gonna place some rocks with a combination of black and burnt sienna. We do this with a filbert brush and we push them into the wet paint. Above we're gonna make it muddy, because if snow is starting to melt, it's gonna be muddy. Like I said. Now, then we can start working with the knife into the rocks. We push the blue paint flat on the surface of the palette and scrape off a little roll. And then start slowly scratching over the wet paint of the rocks. And I said it before, if you need some help and if you want to see more, I'll be happy to show it in my studio. And especially for all the newcomers to the island, welcome. And no, this is not a tutorial. I produce these shows as a volunteer for more than 7 years to support the North Island Wildlife Recovery Center in Arrington and to give you an impression what you can do with oil painting. And not in the last place, I love to show the beautiful provinces of Canada with a great history. And no, I don't receive a fat paycheck for these shows, what a lot of people always seem to think I hear time after time, because again I do this as a volunteer and with lots of pleasure. And that being said, I feel like a medieval explorer in this beautiful country with wide open spaces, mountains, fresh, clean air and a wildlife population where we only can dream of in Holland, my birthplace. So I have a lot of good plans and ideas for the future, but the pace of the delivery of the shows will be a bit slower as I like to deliver top quality episodes. So thanks for understanding and I hope you enjoy it. In the meantime, I keep working with a knife to scratch the snow on the surface and it works great. In the beginning, we made 3 tones of snow with titanium white, phthalo blue and an eeny-meeny touch of light yellow to blush the blue down. Remember, yellow is the opposite color of blue in the color circle. And it's paying off. And on top of it, I put a bit of highlight on the edges. Snow is nothing more than millions of mirror crystals and these reflect the light what's surrounding them. Okay, enough scratching for the moment. I want to give the mountain more rocks. And yes, I'm gonna speed up the video, otherwise you see me doing the same trick all over again. And I think by now you know how it works, but I will explain it one more time. We take black and a bit of burnt sienna and hold the brush like a spoon and push it into the blank canvas. And yes, it's quite work, but it will pay off at the end and it saves you a lot of extra layers. Then, while it's still wet, the magic can begin. We take the knife again and start scratching over the wet surface. So don't make the mistake to do the whole mountain and wait till it's dry. No, do it right away. And don't forget to use a lot of medium when you bring up the ground layer. The secret of the knife is, and I told it before, that it will only work on a wet underground. At the front side of this steep rock, we can use the light blue and maybe a bit of highlight over that. In the shadow part, we can use the dark blue with a bit of dark gray. Just use your fantasy and look at tons of reference photos, or do what we did, make a tour to Alaska and start shooting photos wherever you can. It's very impressive to see these rugged, rough mountains for real, and of course the floating icebergs. Or ice mountains, I don't know how you call them. So we don't have to hold back with the roughness of those rocks. We can go ahead and start scratching. At the start, the knife will be a challenge, but the more you do it, the better it goes. I told that before. And on a certain moment, you don't want to miss it anymore. You can achieve fantastic effects with adding shadow and light parts. Like this part here. It looks dull and dark at the start, but we put some snow light on the top. And then at the shadow part we go in with a dark blue, which gives a cold, shadowish effect. Then we do one more bluish slope down here and we move to the next part of this gigantic mountain. First, I do a bit of light gray in the back. Later we'll get more snow and then we fill it up again with dark tones. And let me skip a bit of this video because you saw it before. When you got enough dark, we can start with the filbert brush and paint a few lighter parts just to make a kind of road map for yourself, and it will make the mountain round. Under the steep part we can create a kind of slope, with tons of snow of course, but first we make it grayish. And this will work great as a light background for our big black fish jumping out of the water. He will be in the front. Yes, he looks like a ghost, but we leave him alone for a while as we first want to finish the background. And like I said, we want to create contrasts, so the background should be as light as possible. So we start scratching again, and first we use a darker bluish gray for this particular slope. And with a light tone we create a new edge on the next mountain, and look how it comes forward. And with the same technique we can move on creating the most fantastic slopes until we reach the end of the painting. Sometimes I find that pity. Now what I really can recommend is that if you have the opportunity, and if it's not too cold, sit down with a sketchbook and start sketching. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece, just let your pencil running over the paper and have some fun. That's the most important part. During our camping trips, I always sat down and started drawing the most simple things like a stone, a flower, a branch. It doesn't matter. It's just the best what you can do to develop your eye-hand coordination. And we had some luck when we were in Alaska. The weather was great, so I did a lot of sketching. And what did I sketch over there? Well, of course the mountains, birds, ships, old harbors. Everything was so interesting. But I like to sit also in my own garden and just sketch a bird, a rabbit, a mouse, or whatever comes crabbling around there. So no, you don't have to go all the way to Alaska. In the meantime, I faded the lower part of the wet snow out, and now it's time to paint some sunshine in the snow. We can use a strong highlight color, titanium white with a touch of light yellow, and scratch it over the wet paint wherever you like it. And the decision is up to you, but never overdo it, otherwise you spoil the effect. Let's do a few more highlights here and there, and also on the white slope below down here. And then it's time for a little break, and I can tell you about our adventures in Alaska. So sit back and enjoy. We decided to go by helicopter to Vancouver, and from Nanaimo we lifted up into the blue sky in less than seconds. I was surprised about the lifting speed. Okay, it's a bit noisy and shaky, but in a short time we flew into the Vancouver harbor. And I must say, it's absolutely spectacular. And after a soft landing, we enjoyed the high-rise buildings of Vancouver. And from here we took the boat to Alaska in a magical mystery cruise ship, and here it is. Okay, that was a cool helicopter ride. Now this is our magical mystery cruise ship, the Mokum, and we're heading for Skagway. So we leave the harbor and we will see you over there. Well, it's a nice smooth sea, but man, it's cold. It's just so cold, and I forgot my winter coat. Finally, the Skagway harbor. I must admit I was almost seasick, but this feels better. Let's find the railway station. Here it is. We're gonna make a train trip over the White Pass and Yukon Trail, and I'm pretty excited. Wow, there are a lot of trains here. Look what a great log is coming up, and I bet he's exporting tons of gold. And I always love the sound of the flutes and the steam, and now we have to find our train, and I think it's over there. This must be my train. Now let's hop in and enjoy the most exciting train ride of your life. Have fun! But, hey guys, hey, wait for me.
Hey, open the doors, wait for me. Oh, come on, I gotta run. We are in the train on the White Pass in Yukon Road. This is an 177-kilometer trek from Skagway, Alaska to Whitehorse. These tracks were laid during the Gold Rush of Klondike in 1897, so there is a lot of history to watch here, like this old trestle, who was never finished and almost collapses. And sorry for this shaking film, but I did my best to keep this giant camera in balance. The train passes a lot of trestles, and I'm curious to see that horrible footpath where prospectors struggled with their horses and easels to transport their gear over this pass. And here it is. Imagine a long row of hundreds of prospectors with easels, horses, carrying tons of materials over this narrow path. There was no time to turn or rest, and if you slipped away, it was the end of your adventure. This path was not a walk in the park. From my comfortable seat in this luxury train, it's hard to imagine how people in those days stepped into these rugged mountains with all the dangers, but they did it. And did they become rich? Well, not really. Only the first few hundred found enough gold to say, okay, this was worthwhile to go through this living hell, and returned back rich. For the other thousands of gold rush prospectors, it was a long struggle to gather the leftovers, but I showed you this in my first episode about the Yukon. We follow the narrow gauge railroad, and here's the famous turn, which is so easy, as the lock doesn't have to be turned separately. It was finished in 2013, and we see still the fresh cut stones. In the distance we see Skagway beneath us, and we heading back. And if I see this gigantic rock so close to the train, I can imagine how difficult it was to make this railroad. We're heading back to Skagway, which is a popular stop for the cruise ships, and of course the tourist trade is a big part of business. Slowly our train is getting back to our fantasy station in Skagway. And you know what, don't start looking for it, because I made it all myself. But I think you might have understood by now. And yes, I'm a model train builder, and I thought it might fit funny in this show. And here we are back again when we started in our imaginary mystery world. And new passengers are waiting for this spectacular train trip. And so we are back in the snow again with our little friend the orca. And yes, I heard from my friend Jim Bennett of Rail Yard Games in Parksville that there are a lot of model train builders on the island. So I thought, let's give all those boys a good time and show a bit of my setup. It's not finished yet, but I did already a good part of it. And my sweet wife Els helped me building all the giant tables, and she is really good in building mountains. It's just another hobby of me, and I do it since I was, I think, 10 years old, so that must be 300 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun. And above all, it helps me to create little stories and fairy tales what I can use in my animations. For me, it's just a nice, relaxing hobby. Building trees, train tracks, and all the buildings and so on, whatever you need for a model train. And sorry I did the train trip comments with a voiceover, because at the start of our holiday I was blessed with a heavy cold, and I hardly could speak. My voice sounded something like this, I believe. You don't want to hear that for a while. So I stayed low during our little holiday. It was just bad luck. During our next episodes, I will show you more of our adventures in the Yukon. In the meantime, I am busy painting the right slope. And with a knife we can create some more steep underslopes and rocks. But first we have to make it wet. And we do this with a dark bluish grey tone and a filbert brush. And don't make it solid. Keep it loose and open. That looks a bit more natural. Snow is after a few days always a mess. So if you want to create an horizontal slope, just keep it horizontal. And vertical, like this one, just scrape it downwards and make it all uneven. A little bit of highlight on the top and that will do it. Let's do one more little slope over there. Just scratch it down. And then we can work on this dark rock. Just a few flocks of snow and then I think we're good. Yes, it's always very difficult to know where to stop and where to continue. But I think for now this little guy has enough snow. So let's move on to the other side. And on the other side we can paint more dark rocks. And we can do this with a filbert brush and we use a very dark bluish gray. Let's say almost black. Now let's make this whole front part a bit more stable and create a kind of waterline for the sea. Who's there? Not yet, but it will come. And yes, you could expect it. We take the knife again and scratch a bluish gray downwards to create more rough rock walls. Let's give the edges a bit more light. That makes it more spectacular. Just let the knife dance over the wet surface. That is the secret. And don't forget to scratch a bit of highlight on top of that. And I couldn't resist it. Let's do one more little edge here. And I think by now we're good. It's time to paint some water under the mountain. I mixed a bluish dark gray and with the 1-inch brush we can shake it into the canvas. I hold the bristles flat against the canvas and very carefully we can try to make a kind of coastline beneath the rocks. And so now and then we can throw a bit of lighter gray to the paint, but no worries, the reflections will be there. And down below I go a little bit darker. To save some time I cut away a few scenes, because it's all time the same trick. And as we approach the outlines of our white ghost, we have to be a bit more carefully and read the outlines as good as we can. Just go around it. Don't bother about the tail, it will be invisible after all. Let's move to the other end of the canvas and do the same technique over there. We try to keep the brush move horizontal. In the sky we make little crisscross strokes to create some movement, but in the water we keep it straight as possible. Let's go around the future tail and just fill it up with the dark color and use some medium to make it nice and wet. With a light snow tone we can make some reflections, very simple. Just push the brush downwards a few times, clean the brush and fade it in very softly with crisscross moves and no pressure. With a knife, yes, there he is again, the knife. We can make some scratches over the surface to create some wind or water ripples. It looks always so cool, at least if you don't mess up like I just did. Let's fade out that middle ripple, I didn't like it. See, and that's the beautiful magic of oil paint. If it goes wrong, you always can save yourself. You fade it out and start all over again. At the other side, we can make some more stronger reflections. We start with the light snow reflections and under the dark rocks, we can do a few darker ones. Makes sense, right? Don't forget to use medium to keep the paint nice and smooth. Then clean the brush and go softly over it from left to right till you think enough is enough. With a clean brush we can push a few movements into the water. It doesn't do much, but it's just cool. Then, with the light snow tone on the knife, we can create all kinds of floating things on the water. And actually there were little pieces of ice and snow. When we were in Alaska, I saw the sea full of these little tiny snow cones. And I thought we can do this too in our painting. And we can't paint a little iceberg. We used a knife and we used that bluish grayish tone which we mixed for the snow. Then we keep pushing the knife upwards and slide over the wet surface. We use different snow tones, but it's important that we keep it translucent as the ice is melting. So no pressure on the knife, and then the knife is doing the job for you. We don't paint it too big as we want to keep some space for our jumping fish. And he will look like a fakir as he jumps on this little spike bed, and we don't want that, so give him some space. And before you start calling me van, hey Michael, this is not a fish. Sorry, you're right. It is officially considered a dolphin, although it's the biggest member of the family of dolphins. So again, sorry for making fun of my fishy friend. And you might know by now, and certainly my students know this, in Amsterdam we make fun of everything. We don't take life too serious, and that is, through the ages, the mental way of survival of the Amsterdam population. And what can we tell more about these killer whales? Orcas have the second heaviest brain among all marine mammals. They are intelligent social animals with a very complex communication and hunting strategies. And they are not very picky with food. They eat a wide variety of prey depending on what is available in their neighborhood. So that can be fish, penguins, seals, sharks, and even other whales when the need is high, so they're cannibals. It is known that if you are too close with your doggy at the coastline, an orca shovels on his belly up to the beach and snaps your doggy away. So beware. In some areas, killer whales have developed specialized techniques for hunting salmon. I tell you what they do. They're herding them into shallow water and stunning them with their tails. Yes, these guys can think and organize. So again, beware. This is not a pet. In the meantime, I'm giving our friend a dark tone. First, we do all the outlines to be sure we keep the body in one piece. And my technique is always that I never draw lines. I sketch. And that is a secure way of drawing, believe me. And yes, it takes some time and it's a bit tedious work, but very rewarding. And in a certain way, very relaxing also. Just put your brain on zero, listen to some music and have a cool drink, and above all, enjoy. And like my old friend Bob Ross said, it's a joy of painting. And he was right. No computers, no AI, it's only you. Creating your own world, isn't that cool? After finishing the complete outline, we can take a small filbert brush and, like it was a kid's coloring book, we can fill in the body with a black tone. And it looks very simple, but keep in mind to follow the curves of the body. So no horizontal or vertical strokes, just follow the body line. From here we keep filling in the body, and we can use a small filbert brush. First we push the paint into the canvas and then fade it out with very light brush strokes. And for the light spots we keep a few places open. We will do that later. And there will be some glossy spots on the back, but first we want to fill in the rest of our friend. It might happen that we have to give him a second layer. If you finish the body and let it dry for a few days, sometimes you will see a bit of the canvas peeping through. Oil paint can shrink a bit, so we can give it always another layer. With a dark grey tone we can fill in his light spots, which are in these parts not really light because they are in the shadow of his body. And the tail, well, the tail will be invisible as the biggest part will be covered with foam. In the dark grey spots we can paint A tiny bit of the ochre tone is a kind of backlight. Water is always reflecting, so it's a good optical trick. Let's give our orca friend 2 side fins. Usually you don't see the left fin, but I want to do it anyway just for the balance in the painting. So with a very light ochre tone, almost white, we can make these big spots light, but it needs a bit of grey also. And on the upper edges we paint some highlight. We have to create the illusion that these spots are round parts of the body. So we cannot use one color. Yes, I know it can be tricky, but it will work at the end. Under his chin we can do a bit more grey just for the effect. And then with a clean soft brush we can fade it all in, and later you can always add some more effect if you want. On his nose we want some shine, the same on his forehead. And before I forgot to tell you, never make the mistake to paint an eye. He has excellent eyes, but really on this distance you don't see them. In the meantime I gave his back a little bit of glance with a dark grey, and over that maybe a little bit more light. Let's do a few more wet places on his back. Just use some lighter grey and fade it in softly. And after all, you might have noticed that it's more work than you think to make this body round in 3D, but we are moving forward. Now we can do a few more shiny effects here and there, and then, if I may advise you, leave the painting alone. Put it away, let it dry for a few days, and don't look at it. With a fresh eye we look at it again, and then you might notice we need a bit more light on the mouth and maybe on the belly too. We do a few small paint strokes with highlights and then fade it out with your pinky. The pink is an excellent fade in or fade out instrument with the right pressure. You know what? Let's take a little break. Before we say goodbye, I would like to show you our Academy of Music and Art in Qualicum Beach. I teach there music and art, and my wife Els card making and scrapbooking. I would love to show you my paintings just to get some inspiration, and I understand that for a lot of you Qualicum Beach is not next door, but if you happen to be on Vancouver Island, just hop in for a chat and take a look around. And of course you are always welcome if you need some advice about materials, maybe color mixing, or whatever you want to know about art and music. My sweet wife Els is a magician with paper, and she shows a great selection of scrapbooking and paper art. And don't forget that we offer a wide range of courses in music, painting, scrapbooking and card making. Yes, there is a whole new world, a whole new creative world for you right at your fingertips. Our steady viewers might know by now that I love to support the North Island Wildlife Recovery Center in Arrington with my paintings. This place, founded by Sylvia and Robin Campbell, is a lovely retreat for wounded birds and other animals who need recovery and help. Also a lovely place for inspiration. So if you ever visit the island, take a look in the center and admire all the wonders of nature. Enjoy! It's a wonderful place to visit and to get inspiration. And by the way, something about our website. We are in Qualicum Beach with our lesson center. And the site says parksville.com. Now, I got a lot of questions about that. I will explain. Once we started in Parksville, and then we moved to Qualicum Beach with our lesson center, that is. But our digital studios, where we do all the preparation work, television show and so on, those are still in Parksville, and that is the reason that we keep it this way. And it's not easy to change a website, I can tell you. If it's settled, it's almost impossible to change names, places, and so forth. Okay, let's focus on the splashing. We have a light and a dark tone snow color on the fan brush. So, one dark on one side, one light on the other side. And with a soft pressure we can slowly dip in all the bubbles. And on top of that we can paint some highlight here and there, and maybe it's handy to have a separate fan brush with two different tones of highlight. The benefit is that you don't have to clean all the time. In the front we can paint a few water ripples, and then I want to do floating flows or pieces of ice in the water. During our trip I saw hundreds of them, and they will give your painting a real icy mood, right? And the best you can do is start with the dark tone, the dark snow tone, then the light tone, and on top of that a tip of the highlight. And your mini iceberg is ready to float into the world.
So this was finally the surprise. Our little friend here is splashing around in the ice-cold sea, and that is how it should be. I hope you liked it. Check out our website. Till the next time, and keep on painting.